You're listening to the Feel Good Astrology podcast with Louisa Munson. To request your personal reading, go to feelgoodastrology.com.
Welcome back. It's Louisa Tannermunson from Feel Good Astrology, and this is the May forecast for May 2023. Now, it's been quite a year so far. It kind of built up a little bit, I would say, in March, towards the end of February, actually, as the Jupiter and Chiron conjunction were coming in. And then in March, we had that really come into its actuality. We also had Saturn changing signs into the sign of Pisces, and also Pluto into the sign of Aquarius right at the end. Then in April we had quite a few things going on. The first thing that I think is really quite strong would be the total solar eclipse that happened on the 20th, followed by Mercury going retrograde on the 21st. Now, that has opened up our eclipse season for this year, which closes on the 5th of May 2023. So that looks like quite a powerful day. Now, in May, we've got a lot to kind of continue with energetically, and also to process in terms of new things. And there's one day in particular which I'm kind of a bit wary of, I'll be honest, which is, let me just have a look at my notes, which is in week 3, well, it's in the 4th week, actually, on the 22nd. There's a day where we've got 5 planets at 0 degrees, or as near as. It's pretty intense time. So what I'm going to do is break this down into 4 weeks and give you a little bit of an overview as to what I think each week represents, and then I'll just share a little bit more with you as we go through each one. So we've got the sun changing signs. Now, Mercury's not changing signs this month because it's retrograde, so it's sticking in the sign of Taurus, though it does start to go direct again from the 15th of May. We've also got Pluto going retrograde. Sorry. I was just looking at my notes there thinking, hang on, I've made a mistake there. No, Pluto's also going retrograde and is getting ready to back into the sign of Capricorn in June. So, Pluto has taken a good look around in Aquarius, it's got the feels for it, and is now, deciding to go retrograde at some point. We've got Venus and Mars and Jupiter all changing signs now. Mars changing signs isn't a monthly thing, and Jupiter changing signs is a big thing. It doesn't happen every month, it happens once a year. So there's some interesting things. This is a very big month for people who've got a lot of fixed signs highlighted in their birth chart. So for instance, if they've got their sun, their moon, or any of their angles in the sign of in a fixed sign, and the fixed signs are Taurus, then we've got Leo, then we've got Scorpio, and then we've got Aquarius. They are the 4 fixed signs, and they are ascribed to being pretty stubborn in their approach, pretty grounded, very rooted, very rooted signs. And so the fact that we've got Jupiter going into Taurus, meeting Uranus, which has been in Taurus for a long time, since 2018, that's going to really excite things in Taurus. We've still got Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, which is again another fixed sign. And then later on this month, we've got Mars going into the sign of Leo. So there is this really big, I think, Mars in opposition to Pluto effect that's coming in week 3 that I think is pretty big. So there's a lot going on. I've called this rebuilding from zero, mainly because of the kind of ground zero chart that we've got on the 22nd. But I really feel like the eclipse happening before these planets all going into aspect with each other is kind of clearing the path. So if we just kind of have a quick think about the eclipse season, I did record something called the Clash of the Goddesses, because I noticed that with the opening part of the total solar eclipse, there was a lot of emphasis on Eris. Eris is kind of taking center stage. And then by the time we get to the lunar eclipse on the 5th of May, Lilith is involved, Black Moon Lilith is involved. And it's really speaking of the divine feminine, which, you know, a lot of people talk about. But in particular, I think the suppressed image of femininity and what it is to be a female. You know, the whole idea of what it is to be a female has changed so much in the last 3 years. And in particular, in this last year, it's gone very, very, it's very, very different, put it that way. It's different to what it was like for a young woman growing up at the moment. And I realized just by saying for a young woman growing up at the moment, that could raise a lot of issues for people who are saying, oh, why are you using those terms? That's not very inclusive. So, you know, these are kind of difficult times to actually talk about any kind of gender or even have a discussion for fear of being cancelled or censored or whatever. So, you know, there's a lot of anger and suppression going on, I think, regarding gender, but in particular what it is to be a woman. And towards the end of this first season of eclipses, obviously we'll have a repeat of them back in forward in October. But at the end of them, the Black Moon Lilith shows how we can integrate what we've learned. So, you know, it's quite spicy, these 2 weeks between the two eclipses. It's really bringing up a lot of suppressed anger. They were both in, you know, like the eclipse took place in the sign of Aries. It was a second new moon in Aries this year. So the Aries motif of anger and getting it out there was still present. And so as we go into May, we've got a lot of that Aries energy. Even though we're now in the sign of Taurus, we've got that kind of signature of anger coming out. And it's like, how do we ground it throughout May? So yes, the sun is in the sign of Taurus now. Yes, the moon went into the sign of Taurus the same day as the eclipse. And at that time, they both went into a tight square with Pluto at 0 degrees in the sign of Aquarius. So, you know, as we're going into May, there is this feeling of stubbornness, this feeling of we need to ground, we need to get stable. And so this month, as I see it, is a month very much about trying to find our calm, trying to find our base. Anyway, let's have a look at this week by week. So week one, I think, is about us coming back into feeling. You know, I really see it as a return to feeling. I think things have got very irritated and inflamed throughout the April month. And I think really at the end of April, and I am actually recording this on the 22nd of April now, you know, just as Mercury's gone retrograde, but it really does feel like as we've been in April, the energies have been getting more and more jittery, more and more, you know, like really full of energy. And so in the first week in May, I think it's really about calming. First of all, we've got this lovely conjunction on the 1st between the Sun and Mercury, which is getting us to talk. It's opening us up, and it's connecting our personality and our identity very much to our thoughts. You know, so we're maybe a bit clearer in how we're going to articulate things. Then on the 4th, we've got a square between Venus, which is very much about femininity, and then Neptune, which is interesting because Neptune is like some people call it a higher harmonic of Venus, you know, because it can look at unconditional love. I consider it as a planet of creativity and also of merging. So and also about losing your identity, because there's something about Neptune that's very sort of like nebulous. If you imagined, I mean, Neptune is the ruler of the oceans. If you imagined that you were diving into the oceans, you would be merging with the oceans. And so one of the things I noticed with Neptune is at one end of it, we are wanting to merge with everyone. It's like this oneness consciousness. And at the other end of Neptune, at the other end of the spectrum, we're trying to lose ourselves, you know, because it's too painful for us to be ourselves. So it's interesting that we've got in this first week in May, we've got Venus in a square to Neptune. It's like the femininity of us, or our joy, our flow, our connection, our natural friendliness feels almost difficult to express And it almost feels like it's an illusion. Like, how do we express our friendliness? How can we do that without losing ourselves or wanting to forget who we are? I also think it could really get super loving. These are two sexual planets, so we could be returning, and this is why I say it's very much about returning back to feeling in week 1. I mean, this is a very feeling event on the 4th. The very next day, actually, we've also got Venus in a sextile to Jupiter, which is going to emphasize the energies of feeling and friendliness and connection. So it feels like between the 4th and the 5th, we are really being encouraged to connect with people, but make sure it's a real connection. Don't be connecting with people that are going to deceive you. There are always going to be people that might use us, that might kind of drain us. And that is definitely one of those negative sides of Neptune. I have noticed that Neptune, because it's not very boundaried, it can, when we're not mindful and really conscious of how we're connecting, we can get into some very sort of parasitical energies. So I think it is about returning to feeling in the first week, but in particular to really use discernment to know that the people we're connecting with are legit. They are really good people. And then obviously on the 5th, there's a continuation of Venus in a sextile with Jupiter, which is really engaging us. We've also got the lunar eclipse in late afternoon if you're in the UK, and you can check out the lunar eclipse in your own time zones if you go to timeanddate.com and then look at the sun and the moon tab, I think it is, and then just scroll down and you'll see eclipses, and it'll tell you what time the eclipse is taking place in your own time zone. Essentially it's a full moon, which is why I've got all these pictures of full moons behind me, and you can see that the eclipsed ones, when it's actually in its eclipse, you've got the sort of reddish tinged full moons. But anyway, this full moon is a pretty strong one. The moon is actually in the sign of Scorpio, and let's have a look at that picture now, actually. So let me just expand it a little bit. Whoops. I did press the wrong thing there. Whoops. Oh my goodness. What have I done? There it is. That was a bit worrying. So we've got this eclipse on the 5th. So it's in the first week in May. And when the moon goes into the sign of Scorpio, people can get very intense, quite jealous, quite possessive. And a lot of our really core root emotions come up. It can be quite devastating, in fact, if you're living with somebody who's got a very strong Scorpio, or who may even have a Scorpio moon. This is going to definitely rile up these emotions. It's almost like there's some vomit building. It's like something needs to come up and out. And with these Scorpio moons, it can be quite insidious, and it can almost feel like you're ejecting poison. It's very, very fast acting. It's not very pleasant always. And so what I would absolutely urge you to be cautious of is, again, and it's about discernment, it's like, be really careful who you're around this time, that there's no underlying baggage that you can see that's actually playing out right now. Because if you're not using that discernment and really following the feeling that's in your body, and this is very intuitive, this is a really deeply intuitive time. So, all you really need to do is to tune into your body. If your body is saying, I'm not comfortable here, that is your cue to get up, get your bag and leave. I really can't emphasize it enough. When the moon is in Scorpio, we all have really strong instincts. And if you are feeling like, not sure about this person has a tendency to, be a bit mean or a bit nasty, or, to bring up old stuff, then get away. Just have a little bit of a clearing around this time. Now, what also adds into this particular eclipse and full moon is the fact that the moon is also in an opposition to Uranus. And so Uranus really does have, especially when it's in an opposition or a conjunction, with the moon, it tends to bring up a lot of old stuff in the consciousness, and it picks up on the sort of consciousness of humanity as well. So it's kind of channeling all the time, and some of the stuff that comes up can be really, really shocking. For instance, when I had my Uranus opposition, which happens around about the age of 44, 43, 44, 45. I also had my progressed moon in the mix. And so I had my progressed moon in opposition to Uranus, and my progressed moon was actually on my birth Uranus at the time. And boy, did it bring up a load of old memories that I'd forgotten, I'd suppressed, and that were really, really difficult to understand and process. So, this is really challenging people with unhealed stuff. So again, pick your company really, really carefully. Also, the sun and the moon, like I said at the start, they're both in a square to Black Moon Lilith. Now, Black Moon Lilith is about resolving old issues, and to try to piece back together and integrate the suppressed parts of us that are angry, that are unhealed, that are demanding some attention. Because at some level, like Black Moon Lilith has felt excluded. It's very much about what we've gone through in isolation and what we've seethed about. And again, anyone that's got experience of moon in Scorpio will know it's quite seething. So yeah, I would absolutely just warrant a little bit of caution. I do think, this energy could be very, very useful for clearing something really big. And I would also add to that, do you want your life to be an experiment? Do you want to test that? Are you brave enough? Or should you just maybe think, you know what, I'll leave that to somebody else. That's what I would choose to do personally if I was in your shoes. So yeah, it's a big old day. I think it's really quite useful if you want to do some inner work yourself, so you're just arguing with yourself. And it could be a really useful day to uncover things with a coach or somebody that you really trust. That would be really useful. And in terms of any kind of deep dives that you need to do into things, again, the deep diving energy is all there. So it's not all bad, and these things always have a tendency to balance out. And then a couple of days later, we've got Venus going into the sign of Cancer. And I think that will also smooth things out. Our feelings are less, we're less wanting to be in the company of kind of strangers and new friends. We're wanting to be in the company of people that we know and trust, and that we love, people that we feel like we're having family with. And then as we move into week 2, we've got some, I think, useful aspects. On the 9th, we've got the sun in a conjunction with Uranus, which is going to certainly liven things up. We're going to be feeling a lot more spontaneous, a lot more ideas flowing, and we're feeling a bit free to be ourselves, to be quite imaginative, quite creative, quite individual. It's very much about sovereignty. And then between the 12th and the 13th of May, I think we've got some quite stabilizing energies. Mercury in a sextile to Saturn is useful in terms of any kind of planning, any kind of building that you're doing. If you've got reports to write, if you've got something to work through with some precision, then it's really, really useful. It's very grounding, and I think it's really useful for anyone that is in some kind of design, architecture kind of role, or even in IT, is going to find this time really, really useful, because we're able to take our concepts and put a framework around them. So if you need that kind of energy, the 12th to the 13th is perfect for you. We've also got a lovely sextile between Mercury and Venus, so they're working together in a really nice way, which I always think really. I think it creates an energy whereby we feel like we've got brothers and sisters, and that we get on really well with them. And then on the 13th of May, we've also got a very, I think, trust-inducing aspect between Venus in a trine with Saturn. We're going to feel like there's a high level of trust with the people that we love, and the people around us. It's a great time to rebuild trust. And if you do have any old trust issues, that's a good day to repair things. Now, we get into the last part of the month. So from the 15th to the 21st, it's a pretty big week. That's where all the significant energy changes are taking place. And then I think in week 4, which I've kind of called the ground zero time, I think that is what we do from those changes. So week 3 is like, let's reset. Let's create a whole new, it's almost like you've taken all the furniture out of your house and put all new pieces in week 3, and then from week 4 you're like, okay, how the hell am I going to live with this and move forwards with it? There's a lot of violent kind of energy going on, I would say. It's so fervent that it's likely to take your breath away at times. The 15th to 21st then, first of all, and I think this is quite useful, and that's on the 15th itself. We've got Mars, which is in the sign of Cancer, in a trine with Neptune. Now, you know, Mars is all very much about let's move forwards, let's drive something, let's be determined and motivated. And Neptune doesn't always have the best motivations. You know, Neptune can be, you know, it can be serene and divine and creative and merged and stuff, but it doesn't have too much get up and go. So I think this could be really useful if you're wanting to use your creativity, and also to have a bit more compassion when you're driving ahead and you know, riding roughshod over people. I think this is going to bring up a lot of compassion. It is also, it's 2 sexual planets. You know, Neptune is very sensuous. Mars is very much, let's get it on. So again, I think, you know, the 15th is quite a great time for lovemaking. Then as we move into the 16th, things start to pick up pace. We've got Jupiter moving into the sign of Taurus. The last time it did it was 11 and almost 12 years ago. In fact, I'm going to be doing some separate recording about Jupiter in the sign of Taurus and looking at when it was last there, the last 2 times it was there, and how things changed and what it does on an individual basis. It's not so much a generational planet because it does change signs every year. So it's not exactly bringing in or heralding a new generation or anything. But in terms of your year ahead, I always like to look at the years in, you know, I like to look back what was happening 12 years ago every time Jupiter changes signs, because there's a real theme of how we expand. And so humanity is moving into this Jupiter expansion in Taurus. And Taurus is very much about finances, our own resources, and also our own stability. So I think there are going to be some big changes in the money systems, which has been heralded already, you know, from Uranus, that went into Taurus in 2018. I've recorded separately about that. And if you listen to that recording and think of it in terms of money and how our systems of money are changing, how cryptos come up, but also just how funny how the world seems to profit from catastrophe and then bring in some kind of solution. There's a little bit of a hint there, I think. So anyway, you know, Jupiter going into the sign of Taurus is a bit of a scene changer for us. Then on the 18th, it's in a square to Pluto. It's going to bring up some massive feelings. So some of the feelings that we felt around the lunar eclipse, given that it's got a Scorpio theme, Pluto is a ruler of Scorpio. So it's like the sort of possession, the jealousy, the need for control is really, really big. And yet there's also this need for expansion. And so one of the challenges on the 18th and the 19th is, how can I expand when there's these controls? And then how can I maintain control when things are changing? So it's a big dynamic for us to work through. On the 19th, we've got Mercury in a sextile to Saturn. It's come back in. And it is still going strong. That's helpful. That's beneficial to us. And then on the 19th, we've also got the new moon, which again is us really, truly being out of the eclipse season. It's a new moon in the sign of Taurus. It's got quite a lot of great energy. In fact, let's have a look at it now. I see that the new moon in Taurus is actually leading us forwards. So let me just... I'll talk about Jupiter and Taurus in a different one. Oh, hang on. I've whizzed past it. Where is the new moon? There it is. The new moon on the 19th of May it's in a lovely trine with Pluto. I think this is really useful because at the last new moon, which was the total solar eclipse, both the moon and the sun went into a square with Pluto, which brought up a lot of stuff about us and control, like how can we be ourselves? How can we feel normally when there's these controls? And then this feeling of control is now being changed into how can we expand with these controls? So it feels like, humanity is being reminded that there are all these controls around it. And, we're thinking, okay, what does that mean to me personally? How does that mean to me in my psyche? How does that mean to me in my long-term goals to expand and to thrive? And this is going to be a common theme. And I see this really being a strong theme as we move into the ground zero time, as I call it. And so we could say that the 19th, the new moon, is leading us into that. Is almost like a gateway from the 19th to the 22nd, 23rd. And I'm probably going to record something separate about that in particular. Anyway, some of the other themes. So it's a new start financially for us. It's a new start in terms of finding security. It's a new start in us feeling like we can have luxury, that we can relax. We can be relaxed in our body. It's also a new start for us in terms of growing. It's also another new start for us in terms of feeling like we can thrive and be a lot more natural and not have to worry so much about other types of immunity. And I'm not just talking about our health, but like our financial immune system, we have all these protections. Well, I really see that from the new moon on the 19th of May, we've got this opportunity to go a bit more natural, which I really like. So that's really nice. It feels like we've got this feeling of a bit more balance. Like, are we coming back into control? We've also got the sun and the moon in a lovely trine to Ceres. Again, another indication of Mother Nature, but it feels like we can nurture again. We can nurture ourselves. We can nurture each other. So again, I feel like some of the energy from the eclipse season where it's felt very polarized. I really feel that by the time we get to the new moon at the end of May, or on the 19th of May, in the last couple of degrees of Taurus, I really feel like we're starting to feel like we're coming out of that polarity. We can start integrating, we can start working together again. And then the very next day, Mars here, which, as you can see at the time of the new moon, is at 29 degrees in the sign of Cancer. It's going to move into the sign of Leo. Now you can see some of this picture emerging already. I really like that the sun and the moon are in a sextile with Mars. It's also showing, not only are we feeling a bit more integrated and a bit more powerful, but that we also can feel like we've got some vitality, some of our energies coming back as well. And we're able to create better boundaries for ourselves and have a bit more discernment. The sun and the moon are also in a lovely sextile with Neptune, which shows we're not going to deceive ourselves, but we're not going to be rigid in our thinking. We can allow ourselves to be creative too. So there's a lot of really nice energies about that. And this sun and moon are also in a semi-sextile to Jupiter at 0 degrees, and also in a not in a semi-sextile, but we can see that Jupiter is in a conjunction with the North Node. So it feels like we might get a glimpse of where we might expand. Okay. So then Mars goes into the sign of Leo. And as he does that, it goes into a complete opposition with Pluto. Now, this is pretty big. And this is one of the things that I think is very much ground zero. This is actually happening on the 21st, that when the exact opposition comes into play. I am going to, again, be recording something about this, because Pluto and Mars in opposition can be quite nasty. When it comes up, it's pretty, you've got the energy. These are the two planets associated with Scorpio. And funnily enough, they're both square to the sign of Scorpio. So they're really challenged. Like Pluto is about control, and it's maniacal. It has to have control, and it has to be powerful. It's like a megalomaniac of the solar system. That said, it causes the most amount of transformation for all of us, because boy, does Pluto push you to your limits, and it pushes you to almost like plutonium levels of anger and desire for that control and that power. Power is another great word for Pluto. Pluto in mythology is also known as the god of wealth. So, it is all about power. Who holds the power here? Who's the wealthiest? And he'll use his power and his influence and his wealth to make sure he gets his own way. So it's really big. And at some level, it can represent the governments, the things behind the governments. I say things very purposefully there. And then we've got like Mars down here, which is like the human individual will, the will to survive. And it's completely in opposition, but it's no surprise. Like if you look, if you do a little search on Google, over the dates when Pluto and Mars goes into their opposition, there's always a lot of warfare or big attacks and things like that go on. For instance, I remember looking up, at the end of last year, I was already looking into this, and there was, just in the last one, there was like a big bombing that like wiped out, a community. At the same time, there was some kind of stabbing. It's like a lot of, there's a lot of breakouts of violence. And of course, this is a huge world. I'm not saying everyone's going to do it, but it is that kind of energy where people snap, or where there is some kind of purposeful violence, for no other reason other than to regain control. It's like control at all costs. In fact, I'm going to write that down so I don't forget that phrase. Yeah, control at all costs. Like most of us will have some sense of normality, and we'll have some sort of sense of gentleness or love or connection. But I think, when Pluto and Mars are in opposition, there's a real lack of connection, because if we really wanted to connect, our levels of love would take us out of this awful predicament of feeling this going off. Now, one of the reasons why I'm worried about this in particular is because on this particular day, or as these two are in their opposition, they're also in a square to Jupiter, which is at 1 degree. It's almost at 0 degree. Like it's in a tight square with Jupiter. So Jupiter's in a tight square with Mars, and also a tight square with Pluto. Now, Jupiter is like throwing a Molotov cocktail into the mix. Jupiter ignites things, inflames things. It makes them bigger. And so if there is any situation brewing, Jupiter's going to just it's going to turn the volume up on it, put it that way. So I'm a little concerned about this energy. And, there's not much we can do about world affairs. What goes on in the world is what we're creating together. And, we might feel very separate from the people making those decisions, those awful decisions about war and taking people out and all those kind of euphemisms that is basically to try and gloss over the fact that there are people making decisions that kill people and murder people. So, I'm not trying to gloss over it. There are people that make these kinds of decisions every day, and they're kind of in their element at these times, sort of psychopathic energies. But there will also be some energies that maybe don't seem so obviously psychopathic, but that actually are quite happy to take control. And there is a side of all of us somewhere. I really don't want to admit to this in myself, but we all have that side in us. That side where we will do anything at all costs. And we might not see it so much as adults because we've learned to stay connected. We've learned that the horror of what happens when you do something like this. But as kids are willful, and kids are really in their egos, and they have these lapses of consciousness where they absolutely just have to serve themselves, and they will go to almost any lengths. And, that's why childhood's so frigging long, so that we can grow out of this tendency whilst we have loving caretakers watching over us and saying, oh, you sure want to do that? Let's talk. And we try to counsel and love and soothe people out of these crazy moods. So this is a really big aspect, and like I said, it's coming up in week 3 of May. So again, if you've got something big going on in your life, around this time, you want to step away from any kind of brewing trouble, unless you really want to get into it and you've got the skills and patience to dive into it and to resolve it. But I wouldn't get involved if I was you. Now, the very same day that this goes, that Pluto and hang on, let's wake my mouse up. The very day that Pluto and Mars are in their opposition, later on that day, the sun changes signs, goes into the sign of Gemini, and will also be at 0 degrees. And so this brings me to the last week. And you can see this mostly on the 22nd. It's a very powerful day. I'm not saying it's an evil day or anything like that. The 22nd is a powerful day. It's on a Monday. So, there's probably lots of people that are going to be wanting to be launching things, because often we launch things on a Monday and we have a whole working week to consider it. But on this day, not only do we have the sun at 0 degrees, the moon changes signs as well. So Mars and Pluto are both at 0 degrees. And then look, Jupiter at 1 degree. So it's pretty much in that pattern. So it's like we've got these 5 planets all working together. Now, if you've got something in your chart at, say, 1 degrees in the sign of, where are we? Let's use another fixed sign. So if you've got something that's, say, 1 or 2 degrees or 0 degrees to 2 degrees in the sign of Scorpio, that is going to be squared by Pluto, opposed by Jupiter. It's also going to be squared by Mars. You'll have a lovely trine to the moon, and you'll have a quincunx to the sun. So it's like if you've got anything in your chart at 0 to 2 degrees, it's going to be pinballing around your chart. The energy is going to be going ping, 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 as all of these different planets are affecting and kind of working synergistically with your chart. It's going to pick up some stuff. So, it's worth having a check out of your chart. Similarly, I said 0 to 2 degrees, but you could also consider it from 28 degrees, 29 degrees, of the preceding sign. So, if you're in the last few degrees of the cardinal signs, for instance, 28, 29 degrees of Aries, of Cancer, of Libra and Capricorn, you're also going to have a similar effect. So, yeah, a very, very big day. Now, let's step out of this huge, big day and talk in terms of the rest of the week then. After this, I think there's a lot of working out. So from the 23rd, we've got Mars in a sextile to Pluto. And that's great. It gives us the energy and the fortitude to start working forwards. We've got Jupiter and Mars in their square. They go fully into their square on the 23rd. That's going to create some tensions about doing too much and getting overloaded and getting a bit angry about having too much on your plate. Around the 24th, there's some Chiron things going on. We've got a semi-square between the Sun and Chiron. We're struggling to feel free to be ourselves and to recognize who we are. There's a bit of an identity crisis. We've also got Venus in a square to Chiron. That creates a feeling of loneliness, am I ever going to feel good enough? Am I ever going to feel like I can connect? So watch out for that feeling if it's one that you tend to have a listening for. On the 25th, we've got Mars in a square to the North Node. That's, again, challenging our original plan. There's a lot of energy saying, come on, let's do it. And you're like, but what about my original plan? It's going crazy. And then right towards the end, we've got a lovely little darling energy of Venus in a sextile to Uranus. That's creating a bit of spontaneity. And then right at the end of the month, we've got Jupiter in a conjunction with the North Node. Now that will feel quite nice. That's actually helping us get back on track. So in the last few days of May, we've got this feeling of whatever's happened, we're getting back on track. Whatever's happened, we're getting back on track. Now, there are some people that say that with these kind of 0 point energies, like things at 0 degrees, it's a new start. We've got this chance to, go fresh and see things from a new insight, new perspective. And it's great, actually. Like for launching energy, it's really pretty useful. But one thing I normally would say, when a sign change, a planet changes signs, I might choose to wait a day or two before really launching into something. So we've still got early degrees in the sign, but we're not in the confusion of. It's a bit like it's a bit like having two tracks running at the same time at 0 degrees. You've stepped off one track, which represents the old energy, and you aren't quite fully into or integrated into the next energy along. So it feels like you're trying to do two things at the same time that may be going off in different directions. And after a while, you end up going like this and start doing the splits and feel really, really quite challenged. So what I would do is just maybe wait a day or two. And that's why I think the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th are giving us the opportunity to assess what's happened in this month of May and think, okay, right, I think I know now where I might be going and how to get back on track. So there you go. That's my rough overview or even very detailed overview for the month of May. I think the first 2 weeks are the easiest. The last two are the most challenging. I really wouldn't be surprised if there's some big world events and shifts taking place around the 15th to the 24th, with the 19th to the 22nd as being this very, very intense time where things may well kick off. Again, Mars and Pluto, they are coming in and out of alignment a lot. And I am going to do a separate video about that. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, if you've listened this long, well done. I hope you have an absolutely beautiful month ahead. If you are somebody with a lot of fixed signs or things at the end of signs and at the beginning of signs, you may want to, get a bit of help. Have a little bit of coaching or something. Just, have someone on hand to listen to you so that you can work things out for yourself. I think that's the most important thing, is how can we find our own level of control and authenticity and sovereignty in these times. Anyway, if I can be of any help, just drop me a line. Lots and lots of love to you. And hopefully I'll speak to you again real soon. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the Feel Good Astrology podcast with Louisa Munson. To request your personal reading, go to feelgoodastrology.com.